On today's show, why have the Houston Rockets won 6 straight games and are one of the NBA's current hottest teams? How has Ime Udoka started to change the culture here in Houston, establishing a new identity for this Houston Rockets team? And which of the young players are taking leaps so far this season? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you versus the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. It's so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selections of players and stat types, which is what makes PrizePicks the #1 DFS option. And with basketball season here now, you can pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you could do LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus reception. So if you've been considering getting into daily fantasy sports, you've got to check out PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. And now it's me, Jackson Gatlin, the host of Locked On Rockets. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Here to break down how the Houston Rockets are riding a 6-game winning streak, one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now, and exactly what's going on in Houston because, let's face it, for the past 2-3 years, the Rockets have been more or less the laughingstock of the NBA. So how has Ime Udoka turned things around so quickly here with the Houston Rockets? And I think it really starts with just a complete overhauling of the team's identity and the culture here in Houston, or lack thereof, because there just really wasn't a culture or an identity for the last 2 or 3 years, unfortunately, here in Houston with the Steven Silas era of basketball. And so Ime Udoka has come in and made sweeping changes, and there's actually expectations for this team for the first time in a long time. And it wasn't exactly an out-the-gate process. Now, it's happened quite a bit faster than I thought it would happen, and many others, even pointing to the past where Ime Udoka took over the Boston Celtics. It took them until January before that team figured things out and really took off and finished the season on such a strong note. But here in Houston, it wasn't exactly perfect to start out with. The Rockets came out in their season opener and they got smacked by the Orlando Magic, completely blown out, but they have had exponential growth between each and every game so far this season, which has led them to their now 6-3 record and this 6-game winning streak, closing out their 7-game homestand strong here to start the season. They got blown out by the Orlando Magic in the first game. Then they play the San Antonio Spurs to an overtime loss in game 2 of the season, which they should have won had Jabari Smith Jr. or really anybody else on the team just hit some free throws. Shooting 10 of 20 from the line in that game is a surefire way to lose. And then they played the Golden State Warriors about as well as you can play them, holding Steph Curry to just 2 of 8 shooting going into the 4th and final quarter. And then Steph Curry decided to just rain hellfire from 3 to close that game out. And then after that 0-3 start, it was really rough. There was a lot of doom and gloom around the Rockets, thinking that, oh, here we go again. It's the same old thing that we've gone through these past 2 or 3 years. And then they turned things around with a win against the Charlotte Hornets. They snowballed that into a pair of wins against the Sacramento Kings. Took a win against the Lakers, then against the New Orleans Hornets, and most recently, the defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets. That's their 6-game win streak, and they're doing it with defense. This Houston Rockets team has embraced and really bought into the defensive identity that Ime Udoka has set forth for this group to have. They are currently a top 5 defense in the NBA, number 7 in net rating, a top 5 offense as well. And this is a team that really wanted to change its perception and really wanted to take the next step forward in its rebuilding process around these parts. They're calling it phase 2 of the rebuild, and that's why they went out and got veterans like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and Jeff Green, many of whom the signings were mocked at the time for paying Fred VanVleet so much money, for paying Dylan Brooks his 4 years, $80 million. And so far, all these veterans have been significantly better than advertised for this Houston Rockets team. Fred VanVleet has stepped into a leadership role here in Houston and has brought accountability to this team for the very first time in a long time. Dylan Brooks has been a sensational two-way player. The shooting percentages might not be able to hold up his true shooting percentages through the roof right now, but even still, the defense has been sensational. He's really taught a lot of these younger players how to be the best versions of themselves, especially on the defensive side of the court. And they're essentially extensions of Ime Udoka and what he wants for this Houston Rockets team, holding these guys accountable, leaning into the vision that he had for this team, being a defense-first team, an unselfish team, sharing the basketball offensively. I couldn't be more impressed with how quickly this team has kind of seemingly turned things around and really leaned into this newfound identity. Now, the question is this success sustainable? And I really think it is, because it's not just the Rockets aren't out here winning these games because they are having hot shooting nights, I should say. Now, they've had a couple of those. They've been able to catch fire from three, and you're going to win some games when that happens. But largely, they're winning these games with their defense. They're finding ways to slow down opposing teams. They had a moment against the Sacramento Kings in their first meetup with the Kings earlier this season, where they ran into a scoring drought in the third quarter. They only posted 12 points, but they were able to hold the Kings to just 15 points in that third quarter, and then they were able to rally in the fourth quarter and come away with the win. So this Rockets team has found a way to hold teams with their defense, and that is sustainable. Defense will stay with you throughout all 82 games. Offense will come and go. You'll be able to hit shots certain nights, but defense is something that you can build upon and can be the foundation of this team's success going forward. Now, as far as what Ime has done specifically here in Houston to kind of change the culture, he really has this level of expectation, and he has a way of resonating and getting his message across to his players, and they're completely bought into it. Now, maybe it's because there's just been a complete lack of culture or identity for the past few years, to where all these guys have just been craving some semblance of an identity for so long that they were ready to latch onto anything that came their way. But it really does feel like Ime Udoka has a firm understanding of how to get the most out of his players and how to put them in positions to be successful, which isn't something we've seen the last few years with Houston Rockets basketball, where now we're starting to see young guys like Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun start to take leaps forward in their careers that they probably could have been taking previously, but now they're being put in positions to be successful. Ime Udoka has Alperen Sengun looking like a baby Jokic out there on the floor, where they've completely leaned into his skill set as an offensive phenom, as an offensive hub, facilitating at a high level for his teammates. He leads the team in front court touches, and he's been the Rockets' best, most consistent player so far this season. Alperen Sengun, the biggest question mark on him was whether or not he was going to be able to play defense at an acceptable level, because we know he's an offensive phenom. And so far, he's been one of the Rockets' best defenders this season. He's tapped into a level of defense that I didn't even know was possible. And a big part of that goes to show that the issues in previous years with this Rockets team stemmed from everybody on the roster. At times, he was almost made out to be the scapegoat for why the Rockets defense was so poor. And now we're seeing that it wasn't him, it was the teammates and the players that were positioned around him as to why his defense looked so bad. Because now Ime has him in a position where he has put the onus on the wings and the guards of the Rockets defense to fight hard around screens, to stick to their assignments on the perimeter, and to switch things 1 through 4, which has opened up a lot of possibility for Alperen Sengun defensively, and there's way less pressure on him than there was in the past. And then Jalen Green, the Rockets' dynamic two guard. there have been questions about how he looks and how his trajectory has kind of been as an NBA player, and whether or not he was really going to make it as a substantial part of the Houston Rockets down the line. And so far, he had a rough few games right out of the gate. I always felt like this was going to be the biggest adjustment for him, getting used to this new system, this new identity. But he's finding ways to be effective. He's been quite a bit more efficient this year. His true shooting percentage has risen drastically this season. He's being utilized in more of an off-ball role this year, as opposed to last year, where the Rockets were kind of just playing AAU basketball, rolling it out and just letting Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. take turns playing offense. This year, he's being used as kind of the tip of the spear, the focal point, the front of the Rockets' attack, if you will, offensively. But he's being used off ball, to where Alperen Sengun and Fred VanVleet are creating opportunities for him to attack, getting downhill, catch and shoot opportunities, easy offensive opportunities that weren't there for him in the past. And there's still moments where he has the ball in his hands and he's taken strides forward, being able to attack a defense and get to the rim almost at will. Drawing fouls has been an impressive part of his game this season. But the number one thing that Ime Udoka set forth for Jalen Green was for him to become a more well-rounded player. And we're starting to see that out of Jalen Green, who's finding ways to impact games even when his shot isn't falling. Most recently against the Denver Nuggets, the Rockets won this game against the Nuggets 107-104, and Jalen Green was 1 of 13 shooting from the floor, only 9 points, but he did have 8 rebounds, he had 5 assists, and he played some really impressive defense over the course of the game. So finding a way to impact the game, despite the fact that his shot wasn't falling, he has now found other ways to be an impactful contributing member of this Rockets team. He's not just a one-trick pony when it comes to scoring the basketball anymore. Ime Udoka is turning Jalen Green into a more well-rounded, complete basketball player. Honestly, I'm surprised at how quickly Ime Udoka was able to turn things around here in Houston. If you're interested in hearing more about it, I'll have you covered for everything going on with Houston Rockets basketball right over at Locked On Rockets.